Hey everyone, this week we are going to be looking at and discussing connecting words. While so many of these parts of speech we've discussed sound familiar, there are many little details and rules that we may not have been taught or just don't remember. It has been a while for some of us. First, we're going to look at prepositions. In the book, the author mentions that a preposition is anything a mouse can do to a clock. Well, I always learned it was anything a frog can do to a log, so you may have learned something different. Most of the time when we think of prepositions, we think of little small words like of or on, above, between, in, with, and there's several more. This week we will learn that there's a lot more to prepositions than we may have learned in high school. Prepositions are a signal that a noun phrase is coming. The noun phrase is usually called the object of the preposition. For example, the sentence, she won teacher of the year. Of is the preposition and year is the object of the preposition. And those are called prepositional phrases. They may act as adverbs, describing a place, time, or manner. And they may also act like adjectives describing a noun. The textbook gives prepositions two categories, simple and phrasal. So you can see a great list of all these words on page 135 of your textbook. This week we will also learn about verb particles, something that may not be really familiar to many of you. When a verb is combined with a verb particle, those are called phrasal verbs. Sometimes verb particles and phrasal verbs look very similar to prepositions. The book gives great examples of verb particles such as looked up and turned in. How can we tell the difference between verb particles and prepositions? There are a few ways. The first is to determine the meaning of the words in the sentence. There's a difference between looking up a word in the dictionary and looking up the road. The second one is if a verb particle, you can separate the verb and the particle. So if it is a preposition, the sentence will not make sense if you separate them. As a matter of fact, it will sound more like something Yoda would say in Star Wars. You can say that someone looked the word up, but you cannot say that you looked in the sky up. If you said looked in the sky up, you did, then you have your Yoda sentence. Sometimes verb particles are like adverbs. The way to determine which part of speech a word is to determine if the word can be omitted from the sentence without changing the meaning of the verb. Adverbs can be left out. Verb particles cannot. We're also going to look at conjunctions. There are two types of conjunctions, coordinating and subordinating conjunctions. All conjunctions join grammatical structures. We are familiar with coordinating conjunctions like and, or, for, but, nor, and yet. And so, forgot that one. Coordinating conjunctions may join clauses, sentences, or listings of words. One thing many students miss with coordinated conjunctions is punctuation. If you're using a coordinating conjunction, try to say that real fast, in two different sentences, then you should include a comma and a conjunction. This is the same as if you had a period or if you had a semicolon separating sentences. Also, there's a great debate on whether you use a comma before a conjunction when listing. Many times you'll see a sentence such as, today I went to the store and brought bread, milk, and bananas. Well, if you don't put the comma after milk to show each individual item, it almost looks like milk and bananas is one thing, and so it can be somewhat confusing. While it's not totally wrong, the textbook reminds us that the comma would also help separate those items. So I think it's better to be in the habit of using commas when listing than leaving one out before the conjunction. The textbook also talks about conjunctive adverbs. So these provide several functions they complete, such as to contrast, addition, cause and effect, example, or restatement in time. Take a look at page 142 in your text to see the list provided. Remember, just like other adverbs, conjunctive adverbs can be moved about in the sentence. Subordinating conjunctions create complex sentences by joining grammatically unequal elements. Subordinate or dependent clauses and main or independent clauses. Subordinate clauses cannot stand alone as a sentence. Subordinating conjunctions cannot move about in the sentence, and they usually come first in the subordinate clause. To recognize the difference between a preposition and subordinating clause, look at the entire sentence. If the word is followed by a noun phrase, then it's a preposition. If it is followed by an entire sentence, then it's a subordinating clause. If someone asked me what are the main issues that students have while writing, I wouldn't hesitate even a moment. I would say comma splices and run-on sentences. Comma splices are when a writer tries to separate two sentences by using a comma. Think of it this way: a comma is not strong enough punctuation to ever separate two sentences. You can use a comma in a conjunction, semicolon, or a period. And then a run-on sentence is when a writer just puts two sentences together without any punctuation at all. In the previous discussion about pronouns, the textbook writers didn't really discuss the relative pronouns such as who, whom, whose, which, and that. Like subordinating conjunctions, relatives they connect a dependent clause in the rest of the sentence. I believe who and whom are often confused by writers. An easy way that I remember when to use who and whom is by what function the word is serving in the sentence. If it is modifying the subject, then you'll use who. If it is modifying the verb, then you use whom. Now, whose, W-H-O-S-E, is a possessive form of the relative. Many writers often wonder if they should use which or that. That functions as either a subject or an object in relative clauses. That can be used with either human or non-human antecedents, which serves in both subject and object functions. Its antecedents are things, animals, and sometimes just a general idea expressed by the rest of the sentence. Interrogatives are often also known as question words because, well, they start off a lot of questions. These words are who, whom, whose, which, what, where, why, when, and how. Interrogatives begin direct questions, and they can also be used with indirect questions. As I said at the beginning of the video, many of these parts of speech are familiar to us, but I'm betting you'll learn a few things you didn't already know as you read and work through this week's assignments. So I just hope you have a great week.